When people ask me what my favorite red wine is, Syrah often comes to mind. Are you surprised? A great Syrah is every bit as bold as Cabernet. It can be as smooth as Merlot, and it can be as spicy and warming as a good Zinfandel. So why don't more people know about it? Syrah is originally from France, where for hundreds of years it's made some of the best wines in the country. But when it's hidden behind labels with names like Hermitage and Saint-Joseph, it's a little hard to recognize the grape and the wine. It's been a relative latecomer to the United States for two reasons. First, it requires a very particular, balanced Mediterranean climate, which is hard to find in the United States. And secondly, in the 90s, we were importing a lot of mediocre Shiraz from Australia, which happens to be the same grape, but that hurt the reputation here in the United States. And these are the reasons why I think so many wine lovers are still somewhat unfamiliar with Syrah. But that's why I'm here, to raise awareness of this grape and the amazing wines that it makes. And so, it turns out that Sonoma, California, has that perfect Mediterranean climate for a grape like Syrah. Particularly the Dry Creek Valley, which is better known for its Zinfandel. But that's changing with wines like these. The Syrah grape itself is actually very small and dark in color, which means that it has more pigment per surface age. And as you can see here, that makes for some very dark colored wines. That also means higher antioxidants and more anthocyanins too, which make it very age-worthy. And that means you too, if you drink it. Syrah's primary flavor profile is that of dark berries. Blackberries, blueberries, mulberries, and even black currant. What some people refer to as a bramble of flavors. In France, Syrah tends to be more herbal and earthy, while here in the United States, the style is more fruity. But even with an American Syrah, you're still going to get some tea leaf, sage, thyme, and lavender too. Oak aging can give Syrah even more depth with lots of spice character. And lastly, as we're going to see in this vertical here, as Syrah ages, it gets funky. It gets these animal qualities to it. It almost smells like wild game or meat. But don't let that put you off, because it's actually a beautiful aspect to this wine that makes it great for pairing with food. And now that you know a bit about what to expect from Syrah, let's move on. So the wines that are featured in our weekly tasting this time are from Nimble Vineyards. The winery is located in Healdsburg, specifically the Dry Creek Valley appellation of Sonoma. That's a mouthful, just like their juicy wines. In short, they're about 25 miles from the Pacific coast, where they have the perfect Mediterranean climate to grow a grape like Syrah. In fact, they boast about 270 sunny days a year. At 1,000 feet above sea level, they use the altitude to balance out the heat of the daytime, with the cool nights to get the Syrah grapes nice and ripe, but also fresh and acidic. And this balance results in a wine that is more full-bodied, but simultaneously bright. In their own words, they're aiming for the more herbal and complex French Rhone style, which is my personal favorite, so I can't wait to taste. For this weekly tasting, we have 3 consecutive vintages here from Nimble Vineyards, which they report are 3 of the best years weather-wise that they've ever seen. And great weather means great wines. Generally speaking, Syrah is a wine that needs at least 5 years to open up and really show its best, so with these, we're right in the window. We're going to start with the youngest wine and work our way backwards in age, which is kind of the whole point of a vertical tasting. This is the 2014 Nimble Vineyards Nobis Reserve, which is a small batch production made from their best vineyard block. In the United States, reserve doesn't technically have a meaning. It typically means more barrel aging, which is what we have here. All right, let's give that a swirl and a sniff. Ooh, right away, it's just a fresh cut oak and vanilla, some bacon smoke, all coming from the barrels, followed up by some dark berry fruit. So it's dry, very dry. The tannins are a little young and chalky too. It's just bursting with blackberry fruits, but there's this savory cassis element to it that I find really pleasing. And on the finish, there's like this hint of red fruit sweetness. If I could sum this wine up in one word, I would say direct. It gets right to the point. It's nice and tannic and dense, and it warms you from the inside, kind of like a campfire. And this is the 2013 Nimble Syrah from Nimble Vineyards. Ooh-wee. Okay, so as I described in the intro of this tasting, Syrah gets funky as it ages, and already this is meaty and spicy on the nose. There's an immediate whiff of animal musk and pungent black pepper here, which is classic Syrah. From what I understand, this vintage was hotter and drier, which results in higher alcohol level and body too. There's an herbaceous quality here that tastes like rosemary or sage to me, supported by a bramble of berry fruit flavors. Tastes like fruit preserves almost. And the finish is kind of tannic and woody. The tannins surprisingly add a lot of complexity to this wine, in the form of herbs and even bitter baking chocolate. Now the telltale gamey and meaty notes of the Syrah are really coming through as this wine approaches maturity. And finally, the oldest wine in our vertical today. This is the Nimble Syrah from Nimble Vineyards, the 2012 vintage. As expected with older Syrah, there are some more mature aromas here, like leather and tobacco, with a hint of creamy cassis. So let's taste. It tastes like red and blackberry compote. It's kind of caramelized, almost buttery. And then there's this long, sweet vanilla finish. This is a beautifully aged Syrah that balances some of that mature muskiness with fresh fruitiness. As with all food pairings, it pays to know your wines. And now that we understand our Syrah, we can pick some easy to make apps that will bring out all the best in these wines. Obviously, our wines are from California, but because Syrah originates in the southern part of France, we're going to take a Mediterranean approach to our dishes. Dates, figs, and strongly flavored cheeses are all staples of the Mediterranean diet. And you'll find all of these on the table in southern France, including some form of cured meat, typically sausages or pork lardon. Let's go with some blue cheese stuffed dates. The smokiness of the bacon in this dish will bring out those gamey qualities in our Syrah. The sweetness of the dates will counter the tannins, and the tanginess of the cheese will frame that delicious bramble of berries in each of these wines. The south of France incorporates flavors and textures from nearby Italy, and polenta can be found on every menu. The creamy texture and the neutral flavor of the polenta in these bites will help balance the tannins in these wines, while the fontina and mushrooms will dance between the berry flavors to kind of give us a sort of sweet and savory effect. Both of these recipes are relatively easy to make with just a handful of ingredients that you can easily substitute with flavors and textures that you prefer. So great wine pairing can be that simple. Just start with some high quality ingredients, great wines, keep it simple, and you almost can't go wrong. All right, thanks so much for joining me for this weekly tasting, a vertical of Syrah from Sonoma. I hope you learned something today, and more importantly, I hope you enjoy these wines. Take care of yourselves. Cheers.